Pakistan gets a warning from the US. Do more to stop aiding armed groups. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is on his first visit to Islamabad at a time when the US is considering giving India a greater role in the war in Afghanistan. Can Washington alienate Pakistan? What are the risks? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Jane Dutton. Rex Tillerson's visit to Islamabad on Tuesday was as much about Pakistan's neighbours as US-Pakistan relations. In particular, the US Secretary of State wants the Pakistani leadership to stop Taliban fighters launching attacks in Afghanistan from their side of the border. At the same time, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahid Abbasi is trying to dissuade the US from inviting India to play a bigger role in Afghanistan. We'll get to our guests in a moment, but first, Natasha Ghanem has this report.
Pakistan has been basking in rare international praise after it rescued a Canadian-American family earlier this month.
This is proof enough to me that the Pakistanis are doing everything to their utmost.
I am prisoner of the Taliban.
The family spent 5 years as hostages of the Taliban-linked Haqqani network. The United States gave Pakistan an ultimatum. If it didn't act on urgent intelligence, it would send in their own troops to bring the hostages home.
The Pakistani government's cooperation is a sign that it is honoring America's wish that it do more to provide security in the region.
The U.S. and Pakistan are longtime allies, but their relationship has been strained. The U.S. says Pakistan is creating safe havens for the Taliban, which is in the midst of a renewed campaign in Afghanistan. Pakistan denies that and says when the U.S. has provided intelligence, it's acted.
U.S. and Pakistan, they have agreed to remain engaged in the future as well for a better cooperation and better understanding of each other's concerns.
U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is on his first official visit to South Asia. On the agenda, meetings with the Pakistani Prime Minister Shahid Khaqan Abbasi and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The Trump administration hopes to expand its ties with India, seeing it as a stabilizing force in a volatile region.
President Trump and Prime Minister Modi are committed, more than any other leaders before them, to building an ambitious partnership that benefits not only our two great democracies, but other sovereign nations working toward greater peace and stability.
A deepening of American and Indian ties is a sensitive topic for Pakistan. India and Pakistan are locked in a decades-long stalemate over the disputed region of Kashmir. The U.S. is stressing both countries are crucial partners. But U.S. President Donald Trump is seizing the momentum of recent cooperation by urging Pakistan to help release other hostages and join in future counterterrorism operations. Natasha Ghanem, Al Jazeera.
Let's bring in our guests now. Joining us from Islamabad, Ayaz Wazir, former Pakistan ambassador to Afghanistan. In Kabul, Mushtaq Rahim, political analyst and a specialist on regional security. And in Washington, D.C., Larry Korb, senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. So interesting dynamics at play at the moment, gentlemen. So good to have you on the show to talk us through this. Ayaz Wazir, how is Tillerson's trip playing out in Pakistan and the toughened stance that we're seeing from the US now?
Well, what he said in Kabul obviously was a little tough stance, but in fact, if one looks at it from the angle what the president said on 21st August last, then it was nothing new, because this was what the President Trump's stance that was already conveyed, and we are aware of it. But well, he is here. He had a meeting with the Prime Minister, so things have not yet come out. The statement is yet to come out, but well, obviously it's an important visit and a lot of things are to be shared by both sides. Obviously, American side or the Foreign Secretary would convey Americans' concern, and Pakistan obviously would show its own concern. So they have to try to find a way respecting each other's interest and accommodating each other's concern. But obviously, it's too big to say right now that whether all American concern would be accepted or rejected, but obviously an effort would be made to make some way to continue with the positive side of relation between us, because the relations were not going in the right direction for the last some time.
No, they certainly weren't. Larry Korb, talk us through what Rex Tillerson is doing there and the message that he's trying to get across, and what he would like to hear from the Pakistanis.
Well, I think he's got two purposes. One, to show the Pakistanis that we still have things we can work on, and they still are an important part of our whole security arrangement in that part of the world. I think the other thing is that I think he wants to tell them that they've got to stop aiding the Taliban and giving, aid and comfort to groups like the Haqqani network, because the longer that they do that, the longer this war will go on. But we have had this on-again, off-again relationship with Pakistan going back to when they got a nuclear weapon, and then when the Soviets went into Afghanistan, we became, allies again. And then, of course, after 9/11, we became very close. But then some people in there allowed bin Laden to take refuge, and so we didn't even tell them when we went in and got bin Laden. So we've had this on-again, off-again. And I think he also needs to lay out what is our long-term plan in Afghanistan. Do we want negotiations, and what will be willing to accept to give the Taliban some role back in Afghanistan?
And Larry, I'm just wondering, excuse me jumping in here, if the US ever acknowledges the role that Pakistan does play, when they helped clear out Waziristan, for example. I mean, or is it just a tough game policy here when it comes to Pakistan?
Well, they do reckon the Pakistanis have been helpful in Afghanistan. In fact, after 9/11, they were very helpful. The Pakistanis were upset that after we drove out the Taliban and al-Qaeda, we took our attention off and allowed the Taliban to come back in by going into Iraq. So part of it is our own fault, because the Pakistanis, like any other nation, want to protect their own interests.
Mushtaq Rahim, The View from Kabul. Tillerson made an unannounced visit to Kabul, and I'm wondering what it is that he took from there that he's taking to the table in Pakistan before he returns. What needs to be seen coming from there?
Well, he was quite clear in his speech last night when he met with the president and the chief executive officer of the government of Afghanistan, where he said that they have clear demands put forth to the Pakistani government. And we have been hearing the same narrative now since 21st August when the US President Trump announced a strategy for South Asia, where they have been pushing and putting pressure on Pakistani government to stop providing sanctuaries to the militants fighting in Afghanistan. They are asking Pakistani government to stop playing the double game that they have been playing over the last 1.5 decades in Afghanistan with the international community, and the quest for questioning and stopping supporting the sanctuaries of the militants in the areas under the control of Pakistani government in federally administrated tribal areas. So the demands are pretty clear, and the Afghan government is pretty much expecting that the same narrative will be communicated to the Pakistani side of the table when he is in Pakistan meeting the senior officials there.
I want to pick up on the double game that you mentioned a little bit earlier on, but let's just remind ourselves about the US-Pakistan relationship and why it's so important here. It's gone through several hot and cold periods over the past 50 years. In the 1980s, they worked together to minimize the Soviet Union's presence in the region, especially in Afghanistan. And as thanks for its cooperation, the US gave Pakistan billions of dollars in aid. But the ties became more distant after the Cold War ended and Pakistan's strategic importance to America diminished. In the 1990s, the US threatened to put Pakistan on the state sponsors of terrorism list and imposed sanctions on India and Pakistan over their nuclear tests. Things had stabilized a bit by the time of the September 11th attacks in 2001. And then the US was back at war in Afghanistan and Pakistan was on its side. The relationship strengthened. The US forgave $1 billion of debt and named Pakistan a non-NATO ally. But at the same time, the US began drone strikes on northwestern Pakistan, targeting the Taliban. Many civilians were killed. And the mistrust has grown, the US accusing Pakistan of helping Taliban fighters and other groups escape capture. So this double game that Mushtaq was talking about, Ayaz, how does it benefit Pakistan? And talk us through it.
Well, I'm not going to go into accusing each other. That I think has been done for the last so many years. It's an Afghan problem.
No, but I'm talking about the assistance that the security services provide to some of the armed groups which have conducted attacks both in Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Well, if you are talking about the Pakistani security side, or let me be absolutely clear about the ISI's role in the game, let's look at it from the true perspective. The two countries, immediate neighbor, Afghanistan and Pakistan, have a long relation on this score, but the trust deficit increased over a period of time because their intelligence, we think, are involved in doing things in Pakistan which they should not do. And similar, they accuse us of doing the same thing. But the crux of the matter is that what for the American visitor has come is like what President Trump said, that there are safe havens in Pakistan. But our Prime Minister and Foreign Minister on record to have said that we are prepared to take the American or anyone suspecting Pakistan of safe haven to the places where they think the safe havens are, to pinpoint if the safe havens are there. I'm not talking of yesterday, I'm talking of today. The Pakistan military is in the tribal area. They are fencing the border with Afghanistan to control the movement of the militants from each other country. But it is unfortunately the other side which is not cooperating in managing the border. So let's look at the problem. How can that be solved? It cannot be solved through the use of force. If the Americans are mistaken to that they'll be able to twist the arm of the Taliban. The Taliban foot soldiers are in Afghanistan. Nobody goes from Pakistan. There may be some leadership here in Pakistan, but the foot soldier, I repeat myself, are in Afghanistan, and everybody understands and believes that 40% of Afghanistan today is either under the Taliban control or under their influence.
Okay, so you're covering many areas there. Let me bring in Larry Korb here. Is taking the Americans, the US, to these so-called safe havens enough, Larry? What is it that the US wants to see the security services, the Pakistan security services, do to try and bring peace to the troubled area, including Afghanistan, of course?
Well, they don't want them to continue to provide these safe havens. And while my colleague, from Pakistan is talking about it's not foot soldiers, well, there are some there that go ahead and they can regroup and then come back in. I mean, from the Pakistani point of view, they're trying to ensure that Afghanistan does not come under the control, for example. They don't want to see Indian influence there. They want to have a role in setting up the government there so that they can maintain influence. So they're providing enough support, not only to the leaders, but to the ground troops to make sure that the Taliban basically will be able to have a role in negotiations. And that's the U.S. policy now. We would like to see a negotiated solution between the Afghan government and the Taliban. That's what we would like. But until that happens, Pakistan is going to protect its own interests. I mean, in international politics, nations don't have permanent friends or enemies. They have permanent interests. And Pakistan has interest, for example, in what role India is going to play in the region. So basically, I think another thing I hope Tillerson talked about, and maybe we can get all the powers that have an interest there, China, Russia, India, Pakistan, to work to come up with a solution that ends the fighting in Afghanistan.
Okay, Mushtaq, you can't just blame Pakistan, obviously, on what's happening in Afghanistan. I mean, Afghanistan has got a problem with its weak leadership, for example. You can't bomb the Taliban to the table.
You know what? Yes, there are internal problems, and these problems can be anywhere. I mean, any country will have any of these problems. We do face problems here with the leadership in the government. Governance structures are weak, and the problem within the security sector, the corruption is an issue that has been raised time and again. But then the narrative or the discourse which is in here is that this is the conflict, the war, the militancy is behind all these problems, that the government of Afghanistan has not been able to really push the agenda for reforms forward. So it can be either way. I mean, it's chicken and egg issue. You can say that in case we have support of our neighbors who stop supporting militants, and the government of Afghanistan is able to take a breath of peace and have a moment of peace, they can concentrate on governance reforms and dealing with issues or corruptions. Coming to the point that Mr. Wazir raised, that foot soldiers are here and leadership is there. See, foot soldier has to be in Afghanistan because they have to be fighting the international forces and the national forces. But the issue is that whenever they are put under pressure, they have an opportunity to retreat back. We have references available. There are numbers of books written where there are evidences provided that people have been treated who have been injured in the battlefield in Afghanistan. They have been able to go back to Quetta and Peshawar and other parts of Pakistan and get treated and get supported and return back to the battlefield. Again, the safe havens discussion comes is that it provides a cushion to the militant groups to come in, do the militia effort, do the fighting fighting militia war, and then retreat back. So the problem is that if we have support of our neighbors with good intention, I think the government of Afghanistan will be able to reach an agreement with the Taliban. But the problem is that things are dictated in a way where personal interest, and I don't know even if we call it a personal interest, but it's a bit of kind of trying to obtain a hegemony over Afghanistan, which has been tried over the course of last 4 decades.
Okay.
We have been hearing the word strategic depth strategy of ISI, which has been pursued in Afghanistan.
Ayaz, what about bringing in India? This is what Trump administration is now considering. I mean, is that a good idea? Is that going to resolve the problems on the ground in Afghanistan? And how does Pakistan feel about it, considering how Pakistan feels about India?
Well, Pakistan's concern, I believe, is known to everyone. We have serious concerns about Indians' negative attitude from Afghanistan towards Pakistan. Otherwise, we have no issue with India or Afghanistan and their bilateral relationship. They can strengthen it to the maximum they can, if they can afford to, but that should not be at the cost of Pakistan. If India is coming into Afghanistan and from there trying to harm Pakistan from the western border, of which we have enough proof, as I said, 40% or even more area is not under the control of the government of Afghanistan. So that area can easily, people in that area can easily be used for activities across the border. And we have the famous character of Kulbhushan Yadav as a witness who has admitted of being involved in activities here in Pakistan. If that element can be taken, or somebody can guarantee that nothing would be done in Afghanistan against Pakistan by Indian, we have no issue with that.
Larry
But as
Korb, talk
for
us through,
India's
excuse
role
me, sorry,
in,
I'd like to bring Larry Korb in here if you don't mind. Why would India be brought into the equation? Is this a card to pressurize Pakistan to do more about reining in the militants? Is it a dangerous game to play here?
Well, I think it's very dangerous because for Pakistan, the real concern in that region is India. They have very good relations with China. When I was in Pakistan a couple of years ago, the people in the ISI were telling me that India had 44 consulates in Afghanistan, which was way, way exaggerated. But I can't overestimate the way in which Pakistan views India. So I think if you want to bring India in, it should be part of a whole other group of nations, including China and Russia, because if it's just India, I think the Pakistanis will basically take that very, very seriously and will stop any of the cooperation that they're giving us right now.
Mushtaq, knowing what Pakistan feels about India, do you think it's a good call to get India more involved in dealing with the crisis in Afghanistan? I mean, might you become even more of a proxy war ground?
See, ideal would have been that we should have had a good relation and a lot of intervention from Pakistani side, because they are our immediate neighbors, and Pakistan has been a country who has been engaged in Afghanistan over the course of last 40 years, and they come as natural allies as part of the development assistance effort from the regional countries. But the problem is that they haven't been playing a positive role, and that's why the Afghan government has to look elsewhere. But one thing should be clear, that Afghanistan has been playing it. See, the bilateral relation between Pakistan and India is their internal matter, just like the relationship between Afghanistan and India is a bilateral issue.
I know, but I'm asking you, how's it going to benefit your country if India becomes a bigger player in your country? How could that possibly benefit Afghanistan?
See, Afghanistan is in need of development support, and it has been looking everywhere. It has been trying to rely on every available opportunity, because the country has to get back onto its feet. And if India is offering that, why not? Afghanistan has been receiving a bit of support from Pakistan as well over the course of last 16 years. So Afghanistan is mainly looking at the development assistance, and if it comes from Pakistan, it's welcome. Like Afghanistan has been trying to strike some deals on trade issues. I would like to also remind you, everybody, that President Ghani, when he took the office, he put all the relationship with India on halt. Afghanistan had signed a strategic partnership agreement with India during the Karzai epoch. But then President Ghani put that at halt, and he went first and foremost to Pakistan, and there as well met firstly with those people who matter the most in the foreign affairs of Pakistan. And he went to the general headquarters of the Pakistani military, met with the military guys, agreed on some bilateral issues in terms of border management, security arrangements, etc. And he tried to strike a deal with Pakistan that could help both sides. But when over the course of after the 2014 deals that he had agreed with the Pakistani military,
Rahim, I'm sorry, we're going to have to end it there. We've run out of time. Apologies, gentlemen. It was a great conversation. Thank you very much for talking to us. Ayaz, Wazir, Mushtaq Rahim, and Larry Korb. And thank you for watching. As you know, you can see the program again anytime. Just go to our website, aljazeera.com. And if you want to see more than that, just go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. The conversation on Twitter, you can find our handle at AJ Inside Story. Mine is at Jane Dutton. Goodbye.